The 1500s. To visualize a century when the brand newish paradigm of heliocentrism, which had already taken over academia, now approaches the masses, many or most of whom still regard born reality as it is, a flat earth and firmament. Simultaneously, the Bible has been being repressed and rewritten, more texts removed, culminating in the King James Version. Blasphemy in calling it after the Freemasonic successor of Queen Elizabeth, ruling Scotland 1567 and also England 1603 with the help of Sir Francis Bacon. Impossible to just shut down old world spirituality. Writings that would have been reproduced earth-wide for over 1,000 years, not to mention memorized. Certainly the story of the first printing press being invented in 1439 Germany is a fiction. Another activity James and his cronies were responsible for during this period in Europe and the North American colonies: witch hunting. It can be surmised this was a crackdown on the last vestibules of Tartaria's healers, elders, transmitters of useful knowledge, the sorts you couldn't indoctrinate into accepting the authority of the Church of England, little more than a reimagining of Catholic doctrine, with this as its Inquisition. Often women, but not always, usually older, widowers living on the edge of settlements or in the woods, proficient in gardening and giving out remedies, most likely acting as midwives. Ultimately, therefore, opposing the black witches and wizards from an intellectual and medical standpoint, who are busy resetting culture, using these terms beyond the hoodoo connotations based on fear, thanks in a large part to fairy tales from such writers as the Brothers Grimm, late 18th century, Hansel and Gretel, Snow White, Rapunzel, brought back by Disney almost 200 years later, predominantly targeting children as per usual. That is why, during the battles in J.R.R. Tolkien's Lord of the Rings, Gandalf, though one old man, with no sword or shield, physical implements, is taking out large groups of the enemy. His white horse, Shadowfax, can represent wisdom, prophecy, and victory for the cause of good. The orcs are decked in dark colours, hence the monotone uniform of those govern mind agents that were called trackers, weighers, Order of the Pinprick, due to the practice of stripping and examining the bodies of women looking for the devil's mark, black cloak and wide-brimmed hat, bodkin, leather shoes, white collar. Modern police have the power to pat you down for no other reason than suspecting drugs or dangerous objects, and remove items of clothing and shoes during processing after an arrest. Is it any wonder perverts, stroke predators orientate to such professions? Up to 60,000 people were executed in the witch hunts, serving as a massive incentive to never consider using old world science. In this tense atmosphere, people would be accusing each other of witchcraft. throwing around meaningless words, seldom in use before, but all of a sudden part of the vocabulary, tearing communities apart, as in the last 6 years. Far right, racist, anti-vaxxer, science denier, conspiracy theorist. Terms to aid in the forgetting of the original way of life. Post-2020 saw a pseudo-feminist movement whereby girls are encouraged to liberate themselves from patriarchy by wearing skin-tight, slutty clothing, being generally self-entitled, shallow, body-orientated. It is learnt copycat behavior from the media. Now and again, no problem, but all the time, it's about boundaries. And this just before bringing in immigrants from a culture with the polar opposite values, who cover their wives up, keep them at home. I think Tartaria was, to a large degree, matriarchal, but not like this. Women helped run society while retaining self-respect and femininity. The 16th century had its own clownish, bizarre items. The codpiece, exaggerating the sexual organ. Skin-tight hose. Elaborate floppy hats with feathers or jewels. These fashions did not last long, once they'd served their purpose. Human psychology, as with nature, will always calibrate back to balance what works and makes sense. There is something anti-human, rigid in how Queen Elizabeth looks in the painting by Nicholas Hillard. The corset dress and whitened face, cosmetics, suggestive of status but not individuality. With Queen Victoria too, always wearing black, apparently in permanent mourning of deceased husband Albert. Hard, vacant stare. It's all against nature. Money and utility are paramount. When the 16th century is visualized in the mind's eye, it must be admitted 90% is straight from the TV screen, only supported with select names and events. There is no real understanding of how the silent majority lived. Why give any hints, albeit mythological? Because they are aware of ancestral memory. To keep the tools, you allow them to stay in the public arena. It is amazing how the church demonized what's God's creation. Nothing could be more correct than to study the stars and elements, especially taking into account their being illustrated in many churches. The same priests who summon the hellfire quote, Revelations 20:14, latch on to Deuteronomy 18:10 and 4:19, or Isaiah 47:13. But what if these are admonishing those that use astrology, etc., for bad purposes? It would be just like the Freemasons to twist or simplify the Bible, leave out key words for their convenience. Considering those overhanging half-timbered buildings with thatched roofs, they look like a patching up job. Labelled Jacobean, why mix materials like this? But the pre-1600 monuments do make sense. Machu Picchu, for example, with waterways and stepped land, escaping the worst of the dry heat. Not-for-profit cooperation, getting the stone up there, like anthills on a mountaintop, it is ethereal. Or imagine the Egyptian pyramids to be seen from ground level in their smoothed, clean, shiny state, aligned with the stars. But a reality where anything's possible had to be based on equality and respect for difference, of opinion and personality type, so each could be useful. Priest, medic, shepherd. Especially when it comes to discussion, aka learning. It is hard nowadays for people to sit down and agree to disagree. Usually because it pays to take a side and money is needed for basic survival. So little great or lasting has been achieved in the last 400 years. Another way to jumpstart the new normal was bread and circuses, centred in Britain around the well-named Globe Theatre, 1599. Timber and mortar around a raised platform, with backstage and area underneath for props, exits and entrances. A downscaled Colosseum. The performances would be a welcome distraction that anyone could afford, packing them into the stalls, relevant choice of words. Shakespeare lays on strong emotions and enforces a timeline to overlay the Tartarian epoch. Hence his long list of historical works, studiously moving through all the kings and battles like a textbook. Are we to suppose he or whoever the writers were just that learned and interested in the subject to reel them off? The so-called Middle Age period and classical. Julius Caesar, Antony and Cleopatra, Coriolanus. Other plays too. The Tempest, set on an island in the Mediterranean. A Greek cast. Ariel is Hermes. Iris, Ceres. The nobles are from Naples and Milan. Midsummer Night's Dream. There is Cupid, Hippolyta and Theseus who killed the Minotaur. Shakespeare needs have had a copy of Ovid open when quilling these. The trend is to stick to Britain as the setting for history, but not to keep its culture or religion alive. Even in King Lear, set in ancient pre-Christian times, it's a harsh, warring, rather uncivilized place. Apollo is summoned in fury by Lear, Act 1, Scene 1. Now by Apollo, King, thou swearest thy gods in vain. And Act 2, Scene 4, by Jupiter I swear, countered by Kent. By Juno I swear I. It is the arising speculative Freemasons, particularly in England and Scotland, that were obsessed with all aspects of Renaissance humanism. No wonder there is doubt that Shakespeare, one of 8 children, son of a glovemaker, a common actor troubadour with no proof of having attended school, and if he did go to Winchester New School, left age 14, to work to support his family, no university, could come up with all this. Then compare to a figure like William Shaw, who became Master of Works for James VI, 1583, Chamberlain to Queen Anne, often cited as the individual most responsible for modern Freemasonry, through writing the Shaw Statutes, 1598. Involved in managing and rebuilding old world buildings, Holyrood Palace, Stirling Castle, Falkland Palace, the big, important ones. He had spent years of his youth travelling in Europe, plenty of opportunity to get a feel for those countries. What an opportunity to unite all this indoctrination for the maximum number of people. Academia is still fawning over the collected works of the immortal bard in every school and university syllabus. I think overrated too for its puzzle piece poetry. Interesting when another author from the same period, writing similar stuff, John Webber, 1580 to 1634, is much less known. Maybe because he specifically shows the sources of corruption. The Italian elites in the Duchess of Malfi, two brothers, the Cardinal and Ferdinand, plot the demise of their own sister, who wishes to marry outside the family. It is based on actual events that happened to Giovanna d'Aragona, Duchess of Amalfi, who died in 1511. Meanwhile, perverse details, such as Juliet in Romeo and Juliet being 13 years old, the subject of romantic interest, is overlooked. The gratuitous violence, or how everything's underpinned with a sexual element in terms of lust, jealousy, and competition, as in Othello, Hamlet, and Macbeth. The last, full of metaphors for what may have been taking place in the real world. The first scene is a meeting of the witches on the heath, representative of the joint effort of the dark magicians to achieve their aim. They stand around a cauldron, a vessel, in one sense literal, of the realm within the firmament, and biological manipulation. They create a toxic mixture, introducing vile, polluting things into the environment and food supply, and use incantations to create doubt and conflict. The fire of spirit stroke consciousness beneath. The location is Scotland, centre of Freemasonry. The atmosphere conjured in this play is so sinister that actors are forbidden to mention it for fear of bad luck before going on stage. The climate, something else encoded in the spell casting. There is so many prospective repercussions of weather manipulation, geoengineering. Scene 1, the witches decide to meet, in thunder, lightning, or in rain, travelling through the fog and filthy air. One promises the other, "I'll give thee wind," so as to make a sailor's journey tempest-tossed. After Duncan's murder, Lennox mentions to Macbeth, Act 2, Scene 3, "The night has been unruly, where we lay. Our chimneys were blown down as they lay." For Scots, used to inclement weather, to make these observations, there must be something strange about it. They can't understand why the sun is covered by cloud. Act 2, Scene 4. By the clock 'tis day, and yet dark night strangles the travelling lamp. Act 4, Scene 1. Macbeth, turned despotic ruler, caring not for his subjects, apparently aware of the witches' tactics, tells them he wants more information. "Though you unite the winds and let them fight against the churches, though the treasure of nature's germesse tumble altogether, even till destruction sicken. The 16th century experienced a lot of this type of thing, quite the list. 1501, Central European flood. 1566, the Danube. 1570, All Saints. This one claimed 20,000 lives. The Great Flood of 1570, affecting Austria and the Czech Republic. 294 recorded in Poland alone. The Bristol Channel Flood, 1607, was the worst seen in Britain, reforming the landscape and bringing economic hardship. Engulfing 30 villages, 52,000 hectares of farmland, and much damage to Cardiff City and its iconic buildings, such as St. Mary's Church and Old Canton Bridge. A perfect opportunity for rebuilds, shifting the Welsh capital away from the riverbank. It is the blame nature, bad luck official explanation, of course. But unsurprisingly, the scientists still haven't been able to settle on a single theory. Some say atmospheric pressure change with strong winds funneled the water into the channel. Others, tectonic plate movements with an underwater landslide off island initiated a tsunami. As well as there being no testable evidence for these, you would also question why it would not occur more frequently then. They are not going with a meteorite from space, like the one that killed the dinosaurs. It is important that Macbeth does not come to the decision of overthrowing the righteous old order on his own, but compelled. The battle for hearts and minds involves a breakdown of trust. Macbeth plays the part of the kind host. There is no notion of the danger. Isn't it just like the lying politicians of today, who've all already sold out to the 2030 agenda, but pretend loyalty? They will do and say anything to validate our good opinion. After all, Macbeth was great in battle, valor's minion, and, O valiant cousin, worthy gentleman. Trump or Churchill, heroic archetypes. When they come to ruling the country, war and strife erupt. Quote, fit to govern? No, not to live. O nation miserable, with an untitled tyrant bloody sceptred. The base motives of such people is described. It is to do with fear, pride, and ambition. So Lady Macbeth knows how to touch a nerve when she mocks him for being infirm of purpose, a coward in thine own esteem, and too full of the milk of human kindness, that is to say, decency and morality. We know that Henry VIII was of this ilk. In Hamlet, his father is poisoned by his brother Claudius through pouring poison in his ear. Elizabeth and Mary of Scots trying to overthrow each other using religion and foreign diplomacy. The Babington plot to assassinate Elizabeth, either true or fabricated, results in Mary's execution, 1587. The audiences must have been able to draw the comparisons. They would have had their favourite actor who created a Bond, either admired or abhorred, for what was going on high up at court, which they had no power over. It is like the TV presenters and internet talking heads of today, the notion of being involved somehow. A normalization of things, behaviors that should not have been being tolerated, and a degenerating quality of life. He also introduces ideas of division between, for instance, the Welsh and English for seemingly no reason. In Henry V, Llewellyn points out, all the waters in Wye cannot wash your Majesty's Welsh plod out of your poddy. And then Pistol makes fun of a fellow soldier, Llewellyn, saying he won't eat the Welsh leek, not for Codwalla and all his goats. In Mary, the Merry Wives of Windsor, Hugh Evans is a rather ridiculous, long-winded personality. And in Henry IV, Owen Glendower, the national legend, is referred to, quote, now I perceive the devil understands Welsh, and that they are generally responsible for beastly, shameless transformation on the bodies of fallen soldiers. Henry VIII, though of dissent himself, tried to ban the language by the 1536 Act of Union. Quote, because that the people of the same dominion have and do daily use a speech nothing like, ni constant to the natural mother tongue used within this realm. Insanity is one of the most pervading causes of the outcomes to Shakespearean narratives. The black magic involves an attack on the mind. Broken people willingly walk towards the wrong outcome. Hamlet deteriorates to the point of lashing out against the woman he loves, Ophelia, saying he never did. She ends up suiciding after describing his state. Like sweet bells jangled, out of tune and harsh. The academics, led astray by scientism, are still intelligent and compelling, but the song is wrong. The famous quote, to be or not to be, can be given a Descartian translation, to think or not to think. Actually, Hamlet was already showing signs of melancholy and abstract philosophizing on returning from Wittenberg University, Denmark, known for its progressive religious teachings in the late 1500s, as well as implementing the transition to the Copernican model in the mathematics department, with Erasmus Reinhold keeping geocentrism but accepting the planetary movements, but George Rheticus, good name, and Melanchthon taking it further. Hamlet's mind is very much Act 1, Scene 5, in the distracted globe. King Lear succumbs early on. Once more distress comes from within the family and his subjects, the treatment by his daughters. Act 4, Scene 6. Better I was distract, so should my thoughts be saved from my grief. That's what the NASA fantasy does. Presents a false, fascinating universe far from Earth's problems. The Tempest perpetuates this propaganda. Act 4, Scene 1. The great globe itself shall dissolve. And Othello, Act 5, Scene 2. It is the very error of the moon She comes more near earth than she was wont, and makes men mad. Flat earth cosmology demonstrates the sun and moon are the same distance, passing over. The size and color change according to conditions. Midsummer Night's Dream, Act 5, Scene 1, sums it up. The lunatic, the lover, and poet are of imagination all compact. The poet's eye, in a fire frenzy rolling, doth glance from heaven to earth, from earth to heaven. Surely giving out hints here, how the deception works. Similar to the Beatles' lyrics, Fool on a hill. The eyes in his head see the world turning round. And also, my guitar gently weeps. I look at the world and I notice it turning. Even the lyrics, looking through a glass onion, can be interpreted as knowing about the layers of the firmament from within. These people are not going to give it to you straight. What you wonder is if all this misfortune is just part of the human condition or fate, or are these convenient excuses for the activities of a small group of destructive individuals? Some suggest this realm is ruled by the demiurge, and people have become so inured since 1600 to living in a harsh environment, it is no wonder this conclusion is being drawn. All the good and useful stuff, specifically the land and air, is now owned, intensively farmed, deforested, and out of bounds. We find a fascinating parallel with the desire of a few evil people to control a future that's already been written out in the ancient Indian stories. One, set in 5000 BC, Bengal, describes a prince, Vasudeva, with consort, travelling to his family palace with newlywed bride Devaki. As custom states, she's accompanied by her brother Kamsa. Quote from translation by Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Kamsa was driving the chariot when suddenly there was a miraculous sound vibrated from the sky, which especially announced to Kamsa, "Kamsa, you are a fool. You are driving the chariot of your sister and your brother-in-law, but you do not know that the 8th child of this sister will kill you. If you were to claim to a 20th century materialistically minded person that such a disembodied force exists, or that it can be invoked, as the three witches do and Lady Macbeth, they'd laugh at you. Or the power to turn humans, even those doing well in life and with good instincts." Quote, Kamsa was not to be pacified. He was a demon, although born in a very high royal family. The witches goad Macbeth, raising paranoia by prophesizing a fruitless crown, because Banquo shalt get kings, though thou be none. This is a nod to James I, a bit of political indoctrination, as he was said to be a descendant of a real-life Banquo of history in the Stuart line. Macbeth's better nature tries to reason with him. He is here in double trust. First, as I am his kinsman and his subject, strong both against the deed. Then as his host, who should against his murderer shut the door, not bear the knife. Vasudeva, a personification of righteousness, tells Kamsa, "One should not be envious of anyone. Moreover, that if you kill her, it will go against your high reputation. But, unfortunately, those who are demoniac or atheistic, by nature can hardly assimilate any good instruction." End quote. Indeed, hard to make someone caught up in scientism concepts see the importance of spiritual principles. The famous scientists of this period rallied around denial of old methods, propping each other up. Giordano Bruno, Bracchi, Newton, Copernicus, Galileo. There was an emphasis on laboratory tests, dissection, and labeling the human body. None of it improved people's lives. Ancient Bengal, however, is depicted, quote, "It appears that although they were in a small village, they still were rich in material possession. Their wealth was in milk, yogurt, clarified butter, and many other milk products. They were rich in various types of jewelry, ornaments, and costly garments. Not only did they possess all these things, but they could give away in charity lavishly. The resets, especially around the 16th century, provide notions of progress on a linear timeline. But the key truism, what's becoming a common phrase, is history repeats itself. As usual, nature is the best teacher to seeing how this functions. The vast ocean has tides, always moving and with direction, but recycling, drawing in, expanding out, and connected to the heavenly motions too, the moon. The false prophets, as predicted in the Bible, have since kept coming. In the religious sphere, the Dalai Lama, Tenzing Gyatso, now 90 years old, fraternizing all over the place with the media, countless flashy books with his face on them. Dr. Malachi York, founder of the Nubians in the 1990s, arrested on charges of sexual harassment and paedophilia in 2004. King Charles III, probably responsible for Queen Diana's death, head of the Church of England. Many hyper-wealthy televangelists convicted for embezzlement and fraud. With Islam, it is less hypocritical, in that its leaders are openly political, materialistic, condoning expansionism and war. Nearly all the heads of state in the Middle East hold a religious title. Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, Iran's Grand Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, to name a few. It is a shame because there are plenty of decent people within these religions, but it is worth realizing those running them are demoniacs. I think it would be a mistake to overlook this to save people's feelings, affiliations. Whenever a movement emerges that attempts to bring back Europe or North America pre-1600, or go against the expectations of this paradigm, they tend to be short-lived. The Pre-Raphaelites were a group of artists and writers from the mid-19th century, producing paintings connected with the Bible and Arthurian legend, such as Christ in the House of His Parents and Ophelia by John Everett Millais, and The Girlhood of Mary Virgin by Dante Gabriel Rossetti. They only last a few decades, and nothing much of the same quality or attention to beauty came afterwards. Then there's the 1960s hippies in the US, quickly sent off course thanks to the music industry, drugs, agents provocateurs. What started as getting back to the simple life, living off the land, of which there is a lot on that continent, became centered around the cities, LA and San Francisco. Hedonism, large concerts. The same with the 1990s rave scene in the UK. When they couldn't stop the free parties, different tactics follow. Cordoning roads, stop and searches, changing the ingredients in the pills from pure MDMA, not necessarily to be condoned, but much better and safer than later concoctions. The overall message and symbolism gradually becomes more destructive. Case in point, the Beatles. From a soft rock band singing love songs to After Abbey Road showing album covers like Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, which are occultic and chaotic, ditto the lyrics, featuring Aleister Crowley, Bob Dylan, who admitted to selling his soul, Karl Marx, Marlon Brando, Fred Astaire. It is mass idolatry, nothing to do with the original hippie ethos. These people are from the mainstream. It is not a natural progression in musical style either. Not to mention replacing the original Paul McCartney with someone else. Lennon's assassination is very suspicious. Then there's the Linda McCartney, over-successful brand of vegetarian food products, still sold in all the supermarkets. Despite being lauded as working-class heroes, Lennon came from an affluent neighborhood, raised by his aunt and uncle. Harrison and McCartney attended grammar schools. Beatlemania indeed. It might not seem like they have much in common with Shakespeare, but the common thread is disproportional representation. Such groups prey on the naivete and hopefulness of youth, for a leader to be counter-governmental and authoritarian, but they come from the same place.